The alien market was alive with cruel laughter. Voices rose and fell like waves, and every sound carried the sharp edge of mockery. Bright lights from strange lamps burned overhead, casting shadows that made the place look more like a stage of shame than a place of trade. The smell of smoke, dirt, and old food hung in the air. At the center of the noise, a small alien girl was dragged forward. She was thin, her skin pale and bruised. Her wrists were bound with heavy iron chains that rattled with every step. Her eyes, wide and full of fear, moved quickly as if searching for an escape. But there was none. She had been brought here not as a person, but as an object, a joke for the crowd to laugh at. The auctioneer, a large alien with a voice as sharp as a blade, shouted to the crowd, "Look here, everyone, a fine piece of nothing, broken and weak. She is no use for work, no use for pleasure, and no use for war." His words made the people roar with laughter. They pointed, clapped, and some even threw bits of food at her feet. The girl lowered her head, trembling. She was not just broken in body, but also in spirit. She had been treated like this for so long that she had almost believed the words herself. She wanted to disappear, to fall into the ground and never rise again. Yet the cruel chains held her upright, forcing her to stand while others mocked her. Among the crowd, a human man stood silent. His face was half hidden under the shadow of his hood. His eyes, however, burned with a quiet fire. He had seen cruelty before, but the sight of this small alien girl chained and mocked stirred something deeper. He did not laugh. He did not clap. He only watched. The auctioneer raised his voice louder. "Who will take this worthless creature? Maybe she will amuse you for an hour, or maybe you can use her as a pet. Perhaps you can teach her to beg for scraps. She is no warrior. She is no treasure, but she might make you laugh." The words cut through the air like poison. The girl flinched, her shoulders curling in shame. She dared not look at anyone. For her, the crowd was a wall of enemies, each face another reason to give up hope. The laughter grew louder like thunder in the market square. It was not joy, but cruelty, dressed as entertainment. People shoved one another just to get a better look. They wanted to see her humiliation, more than they wanted to see her sold. The human's fists clenched at his side. He could feel anger boiling inside him. He had come to the market for supplies, not to witness this. Yet here he stood, unable to turn away. He thought of the girl as more than what they claimed. He thought of her as someone who deserved a chance, someone who deserved dignity. The auctioneer, sensing that the crowd's laughter was enough to keep them entertained, dragged the girl up onto a wooden platform. She stumbled and fell to her knees. The chain clattered like cruel music. A few in the crowd cheered louder at her fall. "Stand up," the auctioneer shouted, yanking on her chains. The girl obeyed, but her legs shook as if they could no longer carry her weight. She raised her eyes just once, only for a second, and in that moment, they met the humans. The girl blinked, uncertain. His gaze was not like the others. It held no laughter, no cruelty. Instead, it carried a strange kind of strength. She did not understand it, and before she could, the auctioneer shouted again, "So who wants her? Anyone brave enough to waste their credits?" The crowd howled. Someone shouted, "She's worth less than dirt." Another yelled, "I wouldn't take her even for free." The noise shook the air, drowning out all else. Still, the human's eyes never left her. He saw her trembling, saw the despair in her movements, and in that instant he made a silent promise. He would not let her story end as a joke. He would not let her remain broken and chained. But for now, the laughter of the mocking crowd echoed across the market, and the girl stood in the middle of it, chained, shamed, and alone. The crowd kept laughing, their voices echoing like cruel drums. The alien girl stood trembling on the wooden platform, her chains digging into her wrists. Her head stayed bowed as if she wanted the ground to swallow her whole. To the crowd, she was only a joke, a broken toy for their amusement. The auctioneer raised his voice, louder and sharper. "This worthless creature is up for bidding. Who dares take her home? Who will waste their money just to laugh again?" He waved his arms, showing her off like she was nothing more than spoiled fruit. No one raised a hand. Instead, coins clinked onto the stage not as bids but as insults. Some threw scraps of food at her feet. Others whistled and mocked. One alien shouted, Give her away for free, even then she will be too heavy to carry." The crowd burst into another round of cruel laughter. The girl bit her lip until it bled. Her hands shook so badly that the chains rattled like bells of despair. She whispered to herself in a voice so small it almost vanished in the noise. "Please no more, please no more." She believed there would be no end. And then, the human moved. He stepped forward from the crowd, his hood slipping back to reveal his face. His eyes locked onto the girl. They were not the eyes of someone amused. They were not the eyes of someone who came for sport. They were steady, firm, and full of something the girl had not seen in a long time. "Mercy, I'll take her." His voice rang clear, not loud, not shouted, but strong enough that silence cut through part of the laughter. For a moment the crowd blinked in surprise. Then, as if the words themselves were a joke, the laughter roared back even louder. "You? A human?" the auctioneer sneered. "Why waste your coins on her? She is not even good enough to clean your floor." The man reached into his belt pouch, pulling out a bag of credits. He tossed it to the stage with a heavy sound. The auctioneer caught it, surprised at the weight. The human repeated calmly, "I said, I'll take her." The crowd howled even louder now, pointing at the man. "Look at him, he has lost his mind," one shouted. "He wants a pet weaker than a child," yelled another. Some laughed so hard they bent over, gasping for breath, but the girl did not laugh. She lifted her head slowly, eyes wide, staring at the human in shock. No one had ever spoken for her before. No one had ever given even a single coin for her survival. And here was someone not of her kind, not of her people, offering more than she was worth to anyone else. Her lips trembled. She wanted to ask why, but the words stayed stuck in her throat. She could only stare, her heart pounding. The auctioneer shrugged. "Fine, human. She is yours, though I think you are a fool." He bent down, unlocked the iron chains, and shoved the girl off the stage toward her new owner. She stumbled, almost falling, but the human reached out and steadied her. His hand was firm but gentle. The crowd's laughter followed them as they walked away. Some shouted, "Good luck, human. Your new pet will bring you nothing but shame." Others spat on the ground. Some simply shook their heads. To them it was entertainment. A fool human buying a worthless alien girl. The girl tried to walk, but her legs were weak. She leaned on him without meaning to. He did not push her away. Instead, he draped his cloak over her shoulders, covering her bruises from the eyes of the mocking crowd. For the first time in years, she felt something different. It was not kindness she understood yet, not safety, but it was something strange and unfamiliar. She whispered, barely able to form the words. Why me?" The human looked down at her. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with quiet anger. "Because no one deserves to be treated like that," he said simply. His voice carried no hesitation, no doubt. Her heart trembled at the sound of his words. She had no answer. She could only clutch the edge of the cloak he had given her. The warmth of it felt more real than anything she had touched in years. Behind them, the laughter of the crowd still filled the air, cruel and sharp. But as they walked further away, the sound grew fainter. For the first time, the girl was leaving the stage of shame, and by her side walked someone who had chosen her, not for mockery, not for cruelty, but for something she could not yet understand. Yet deep inside, a spark lit in her chest, a tiny flame that whispered hope. She did not know what would come next, but one thing was clear. The human's choice had changed everything. The market noise faded behind them, but the girl still heard echoes of cruel laughter in her mind. Each step felt heavy, her legs weak, her wrists burning from the weight of the chains. The human guided her through a narrow alley, away from the bright lights. His steps were steady, his grip gentle whenever she stumbled. When they reached a quiet corner hidden from the crowd, he stopped. The girl stood trembling, her chains clinking softly. She looked around as if expecting someone to appear and drag her back. Her heart pounded so loudly that it almost drowned out the silence. The human knelt down in front of her. His eyes studied the iron around her wrists. The metal was thick, rusted, and sharp in places where it had cut into her skin. Dried blood marked her arms. Her hands were thin and shaking. Without speaking, he pulled a small tool from his belt. It looked simple, but the way he held it showed purpose. The girl's breath caught. Fear rushed into her chest. She had learned long ago that when someone came close with tools or weapons, pain always followed. She tried to pull back, whispering, "Don't hurt me, please." Her voice cracked like dry leaves in the wind. The human's hand froze. He looked up at her. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with a kind of anger. She could not understand, not anger at her, but anger for her. "I am not here to hurt you," he said softly. "I am here to free you." She blinked, unsure if she heard correctly. The word free felt strange on her tongue. She wanted to believe him, but the chains were heavy reminders of broken promises and endless suffering. Still, she did not resist as he pressed the tool to the first lock. Sparks snapped as the metal gave way. The shackle fell open with a dull clatter on the stone ground. Her wrist trembled in sudden relief. She gasped, pulling her hand close to her chest as if afraid the freedom would vanish. The human moved to the second lock. His hands were steady, his movements sure. He worked quickly, but carefully. He did not drag her or force her. He waited when her breath grew uneven. He gave her space when she flinched. The second lock snapped. The chain slipped away. For the first time in years, her arms were free. She stared at her wrists, the skin red and raw yet lighter without the iron. She whispered again, this time not in fear but in disbelief. "Why?" The human reached into his cloak and pulled out a small flask of water. He handed it to her. She hesitated before taking it. Her fingers shook. She raised it to her lips. The first sip made her cough, unused to clean water, but she drank more. Greedily, tears blurred her vision. When she finished, he handed her a piece of dry bread from his pack. She held it carefully, as if it were treasure. She bit into it, the taste plain but filling. For someone who had known only scraps and insults, it felt like a feast. Her eyes lifted to him again, searching for answers. "Why give this to me? Why waste your coins? Why free me?" He stood tall, his cloak shifting in the dim light. His voice was calm. "Because you are not what they said you are. You are not a joke. You are not broken. You are someone who deserves to live, and no one should live in chains." The words sank deep into her chest. For so long she had been told she was worthless. For so long she had believed it. But now this stranger spoke as if she was more than that. His words felt heavier than the chains that once bound her. She wanted to thank him, but her voice refused to form the words. Instead, she clutched the cloak he had placed over her shoulders. Its warmth felt strange but comforting. She lowered her eyes, hiding the tears that slipped free. The human did not push her to speak. He only nodded and turned toward the end of the alley. "We must move," he said. "The crowd will not forget what happened. They will not forgive me for taking you. We must leave before they follow." Her body shivered at the thought. She had seen what angry crowds could do. But when she looked at him, standing strong despite the danger, a spark of trust stirred in her chest. For the first time in her life, she walked without chains. For the first time, she was not dragged but guided. Her steps were unsteady, but her spirit felt strangely lighter. Behind them, the broken chains lay on the ground, silent proof that something had changed. She was still weak, still afraid, but the human had given her something the crowd could never take back: hope. The night grew darker as the human led the girl away from the market. The bright lights faded behind them, leaving only the dim glow of scattered lamps and the silence of empty streets. The girl walked close to him, still weak, her body trembling. Yet each step without chains felt like a dream she feared would end. But the market was not a place that forgot so easily. Rumors spread like fire. The crowd had laughed, but laughter often turned to anger. They did not like being denied their cruel fun, and some hated the human even more. A whisper ran through the alleys. The fool human took the broken girl. In the darkness, shadows gathered. Groups of rough aliens moved quietly. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. They were hunters, not because they sought food, but because they hunted weakness, and now they sought revenge. The girl sensed it first. Her steps faltered, her hand clutching the human's cloak. "They are coming," she whispered. Her voice shook, her eyes darted around, seeing figures, slipping through the streets. The human turned his head slightly. His eyes narrowed. He had known this would happen, but he had hoped for more time. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder, steadying her. "Stay close," he said, calm but firm. From the shadows, a laugh echoed, not playful but sharp like a blade. "So this is the human who thinks himself a savior?" A voice sneered. Several figures stepped into the open, their bodies tall and broad, armed with crude weapons. Their eyes shone with cruelty. The leader, a scarred alien with jagged teeth, grinned. "You ruined the fun at the market, you paid for trash, and now you think you can just walk away?" He spat on the ground. "No one makes a fool of us." The girl's breath caught. Her whole body froze. She remembered nights like this, when hunters came, when pain followed. She gripped the cloak tighter, whispering, "Please, run, leave, me, save yourself," but the human did not move to run. His jaw tightened, his eyes never left the hunters. He stepped slightly in front of the girl, shielding her with his body. "If you want me, come and try," he said. His voice was calm, but carried steel. The hunters laughed, circling closer. Their weapons glinted in the low light. "Brave words," the scarred leader mocked. "But one human cannot stand against us." The girl shook her head in despair. She had seen strength before, and it was never enough. She had seen kindness before, and it always ended in blood. Tears filled her eyes. She whispered, "Why do you not run?" "You will die for me." The human glanced at her. His face softened for just a moment. "Because you are worth more than they will ever understand," he said quietly. Then his hand tightened into a fist. The hunters struck first. They rushed, forward with snarls. The human moved quickly, faster than the girl thought possible. He ducked beneath a swinging blade and drove his fist into the attacker's stomach. The alien doubled over with a grunt, falling to the ground. Another swung a club. The human caught the arm, twisted it, and sent the weapon clattering across the street. His strength was raw, unpolished, but full of determination. He fought not for pride, not for survival, but for her. The girl's heart pounded as she watched. Each strike he took made her flinch. Each wound he gave made her breath catch. He bled when a blade grazed his arm, but he did not falter. He moved like a wall, keeping the hunters from reaching her. The scarred leader roared, charging forward, his weapon a jagged spear. The human braced himself, his fist slammed against the shaft, breaking it in two. The leader stumbled, shocked, before the human's second blow knocked him to the ground. Silence filled the street for a moment. The remaining hunters hesitated. They had not expected this. They had thought a single human would fall quickly. But instead they found themselves facing someone who refused to break. The girl trembled, staring at him. In her chest something shifted. For the first time she did not only feel fear, she felt something else. Hope. The scarred leader spat blood, crawling back to his feet, his eyes burned with hatred. "This is not the end, human. You will regret saving her, both of you will." He staggered back into the shadows, his followers dragging him away. The human stood breathing heavily, his fists still clenched. Blood trickled from his arm, but his eyes were steady. He turned to the girl, his voice was softer now. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head quickly, words failing her. She wanted to say so much. She wanted to ask why he fought so hard. She wanted to tell him she had never seen anyone risk so much for her, but only tears came. He placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Then we keep moving," he said. "They will come again, stronger, but I will not leave you." The girl's heart trembled. She had been abandoned, mocked, and beaten all her life. Yet here stood someone who refused to leave. Someone who stood against shadows just for her. As they walked away into the night, the girl clung to the cloak around her shoulders. For the first time in her life, she wondered if perhaps she was not a burden, not a joke, but something worth fighting for. The night air was thick, carrying the smell of dust and smoke as the human and the girl moved through the narrow streets. The silence was uneasy. broken only by the sound of his breathing and the faint clink of her broken chains, still tied to her ankles. He walked with purpose, but his shoulders carried weight, not only from the fight he had just survived, but from what was to come. The girl stayed close, her eyes wide and restless. Every shadow looked like danger, every sound like a hunter waiting to strike, she whispered. They will not stop. They will come again. Her voice trembled, but her words were certain. The human glanced at her, his jaw tight. Then let them come, he said. I will not hand you back to them. She lowered her gaze. Her heart twisted. She could not understand it. Why risk himself for her? Why bleed for someone broken? Yet every step he took beside her made the question burn stronger in her chest. They had not gone far before the sound of boots echoed against stone. A torchlight flickered ahead, then another behind. The hunters had regrouped, larger this time. The girl's breath caught. Her body froze. Her whisper came out like a cry. It's them! Figures filled the street, cutting off both ends. Their eyes glowed with hatred, weapons in their hands. The scarred leader was among them, bandaged. But furious, his voice roared. Did you think you could humiliate us and walk away, human? Tonight you die. And she goes back where she belongs. The girl's knees weakened. She almost fell. Her chest heaved with panic. The thought of being dragged back, chained again, laughed at again. It crushed the small hope she had begun to feel, she whispered. Please, run, leave me. They only want me. You can escape. The human turned to her, his hand steady on her shoulder. No, he said firmly. I told you you are worth fighting for, and I will fight. The hunters charged. A storm of footsteps shook the ground. The human stepped forward. His fists clenched, his eyes blazing with unshakable fire. He met the first attacker with a heavy blow that dropped the alien to the dirt. But there were too many. Blades swung at him. He dodged one, blocked another. His arm burned as steel scraped his skin. He struck again. His fist cracking against a jaw, blood sprayed. He kicked another away. The fight was brutal, fast, merciless. The girl pressed against the wall, her hands trembling. Her eyes darted with fear. She wanted to close them, but she couldn't. She watched as the human fought like no one she had ever seen. He was not the strongest, not the largest, but he refused to fall. Every blow he took, he answered with two more. Every stumble he made, he caught himself and stood again. His breath grew heavy, sweat running down his face. Blood stained his sleeve, but his stance never wavered. The scarred leader roared, charging. With his jagged spear, the human blocked it with his forearm, pain tearing through him, but he twisted and snapped the shaft in two. His fist slammed into the leader's chest, sending him crashing to the ground. The hunters hesitated. Fear crept into their eyes. They had come expecting an easy kill, but this human was fighting like a beast, not for himself, but for the broken girl behind him. The girl's heart raced. Something inside her stirred. For so long she had believed she was nothing, weak and useless. But now she saw someone bleeding for her, someone refusing to abandon her. She whispered to herself, Why? Why would he fight so hard for me? The human staggered, his breath ragged. Blood dripped from a cut on his forehead, yet he lifted his fists again. Is that all you have? He growled. His voice cracked but carried strength. The scarred leader struggled back to his feet, fury blazing in his eyes. This is not over, he spat. We will break you, human, and when you fall, she will crawl back in chains. The human's voice thundered back. She will never wear chains again. The hunters hesitated once more. Their leader glared, but his men were shaken. They had not expected this much resistance, not from one man. Slowly they began to retreat into the shadows, dragging their wounded with them. The human stood panting, his fists still raised until the last shadow slipped away. Then his arms fell, his body swaying. The girl rushed to his side, catching him before he could fall. Her small hands shook as they touched his blood-stained sleeve. You are hurt, she whispered. Her voice cracked with fear, her eyes filled with tears. He gave a weak smile. I have been hurt before, he said. But you are safe. That is enough. Her heart trembled. The words struck deeper than any chain. For the first time in her life, she felt not like a burden, not like a joke, but like someone worth saving. As the night grew silent again, she held him steady. In that moment, she knew. This human was not only fighting against enemies, he was fighting against the world that had broken her. And somehow, with every strike, he was rebuilding her piece by piece. The street was quiet again, but the silence felt heavy. The human leaned against the wall, his breath ragged, his clothes were torn, blood stained his arm and forehead, yet he still stood like a shield between the girl and the world. His body trembled from exhaustion, but his eyes never wavered. The girl stayed close, her small hands gripping his cloak. She had never seen anyone fight like that. Not for her, not for someone broken and unwanted. Her heart beat wildly, not just from fear, but from something she could not name. He wiped blood from his brow with the back of his hand, then looked down at her. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice was tired but steady. She shook her head quickly. "No," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "But you are bleeding." He gave a faint smile. "I've bled before," he said. "It will heal." The girl lowered her gaze. Her chest tightened. For so long she had thought herself worthless. For so long she had believed the words of the crowd. Yet this man bled for her, fought for her, refused to abandon her. The weight of it pressed against her heart until tears filled her eyes. They moved again through the alleys, slow and cautious. The human's steps grew heavier, but he kept moving, always watching for danger. The girl followed, but this time not as a prisoner, not as a burden. Something inside her stirred. When they reached a quiet ruin at the edge of the city, the human stopped. It was an old stone building, half collapsed, hidden from sight. He guided her inside, setting her down on a broken bench. He finally allowed himself to sink against the wall, his shoulders heavy with fatigue. The girl stared at him, her hands trembling. She could no longer hold the question back. "Why?" she whispered. "Why fight for me? Why not leave me? I am nothing. I am broken. I am not worth this." His head lifted, his eyes locked onto hers, strong even in exhaustion. "You are not nothing," he said firmly. "They told you lies until you believed them, but I see you. You are more than what they said. You are alive, and that is enough reason to fight." Her lips parted, but no words came. His voice cut through the chains that had bound her spirit even more than her body. She looked at her hands, scarred and frail, but for the first time, she wondered if they could do more than just tremble. He leaned back, his eyes closing for a moment. The fight had drained him. His body begged for rest, yet his hand rested close to the weapon at his side. He was ready to defend her even in sleep. The girl watched him. Her chest ached. She had always been the one who needed saving, the one who needed protection. But as she saw his wounds, his weariness, she felt something new. She did not want to be just a burden, not anymore. Her hands clenched, her eyes hardened. She whispered to herself, "I will not be weak forever." The sound of footsteps echoed faintly outside the ruin. The girl froze. Fear clawed at her chest again, but then she looked at him, wounded, tired, still standing, for her. And something changed. She rose to her feet, her small frame shaking. Her eyes glowed faintly, something hidden within her stirring for the first time, a strength she had always buried under fear. She spread her hands, and a faint shimmer of light sparked between her fingers. The human's eyes opened. He saw the glow, surprise flickering across his face. The girl stood trembling but firm. I can fight too," she whispered. Her voice wavered but carried a new edge of courage. The shadows moved outside, hunters searching. One crept closer, peering into the ruin. The girl raised her hands. The shimmer grew brighter. A burst of force flared, striking the ground at the hunter's feet, sending him stumbling back with a cry. The human pushed himself up, his eyes wide, but not with fear, with pride. "Good," he said, his voice low but strong. "Do not hide it. Use it. The girl's chest heaved. Her power flickered, weak and uncertain, but real. She had never dared use it before, not when cruelty made her believe it was useless. But now, with him at her side, she let it rise. More hunters shouted outside, but none dared rush in yet. They had seen the burst of light. They had seen the girl they once mocked as broken, now standing with fire in her hands. The girl turned to the human, her voice trembling but sure. "I will not let them take you. I will not let them take me." For the first time, her words were not filled with fear, but with strength. She was awakening. The human nodded, a faint smile breaking through his exhaustion. "Then we fight together," he said. And in that broken ruin, the girl who had once been chained and mocked stood tall beside the human who had freed her. No longer only a victim, no longer only a burden. She was something else now, his ally, his strength, and proof that even the smallest spark could become fire. The ruin was silent except for the faint crackle of the girl's new power. Her hands still glowed softly, the light flickering like a candle in the dark. She stared at them in shock, unable to believe that the strength had been inside her all. Along her chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, but her eyes held a fire she had never felt before. The human stood beside her, wounded and weary. His clothes were torn, his skin bruised, but his presence was steady. He looked at her not as a burden, not as a weak girl, but as someone who had found her own strength. His voice was calm but strong. "You see, you were never broken." Her throat tightened, tears blurred her vision. She whispered, "I thought I was nothing. I thought I would always be a joke, but you gave me hope." He placed a hand on her shoulder, firm and gentle. "Hope is not mine to give. It was already in you. You only needed someone to remind you." Before she could answer, the sound of footsteps returned. The hunters had not given up. The scarred leader's voice echoed through the night, furious and sharp. "Bring them out, kill the human, and drag the girl back in chains." The girl's body tensed, but this time she did not shrink back. She stepped forward, her glowing hands raised. Her voice rang louder than before. "No, I will not go back. I will not wear chains again." The hunters appeared, their numbers greater, torches lighting the street. Their laughter was gone now, replaced by anger and fear. They had seen her power, and it shook them. Still, they charged. The human stood tall despite his wounds. His voice cut through the chaos. "Stay with me," he said, "together." The first wave of hunters rushed in. The girl's power flared brighter. A wall of light burst from her hands, throwing several attackers back. They crashed against the stones with cries of pain. The human moved beside her, striking with fists and kicks, his strength fueled by willpower. The battle was fierce. Blades clashed. Shouts filled the air. Dust rose around them. The girl fought with trembling arms but unyielding spirit. Her light blinded enemies, burned their weapons, and forced them back. Every time she faltered, the human's voice reached her, steady and strong. "You can do this," the scarred leader roared, pushing through the chaos, his broken spear replaced by a jagged blade. His eyes locked on the girl. "You think you are strong now?" he spat. "You are still nothing. You are still mine." The girl's body shook, but then she lifted her chin. Her voice carried like thunder. "I belong to no one." Her power surged, a bright flare that struck the leader, throwing him to his knees. The human moved in with a final blow, his fist crashing against the leader's jaw. The scarred alien collapsed, unconscious. The street fell silent. The remaining hunters froze, fear gripping their hearts. One by one, they turned and fled into the darkness, leaving their leader behind. Silence returned, broken only by the sound of heavy breaths. The girl's light dimmed slowly, her hands trembling as the power faded. She stumbled, but the human caught her. Before she fell, her tears fell freely now, not of fear but of release. She whispered, "You fought for me, you bled for me. And now, I fought for you." He smiled faintly, his hand steady on her back. "You did more than fight. You proved them wrong. You proved yourself." The girl looked at him, her heart trembling. The crowd had once laughed at her, called her worthless, called her broken. But now, after all the pain, after all the chains, she stood free. She had fought, she had risen, and she was no longer a joke. As they walked from the ruin, the city around them whispered. The story of the broken girl and the human who saved her spread quickly. No one laughed now, some watched in silence, others turned away in shame. But the truth was clear. The girl was no longer a symbol of weakness. She was living proof that hope could rise even from the lowest chains. She pressed closer to the human, whispering softly, "You gave me a reason to live, and I will never forget it." He looked down at her, his voice low but certain, "And I will never let them take you again." Together, they walked into the night, their steps steady. For the first time in her life, she was not alone. For the first time, she felt like someone worth fighting for.